You'll never guess which climate crusading minister blew the most tax dollars on taxis in and around the greater Ottawa area. Actually, you know what? You'll probably guess. Why? Because we have the smartest viewers who know this minister has been a total hypocrite since at least 2015. Today's exclusive comes to us by way of an order paper question asked by NDP MP for Edmonton Strathcona, Heather McPherson. I know, NDP. Anyway, McPherson asked, with regard to ministers' office expenses in the National Capital Region. So to be clear, this is in and around Ottawa, so not when the ministers are traveling. What is the total amount spent on taxis by each minister's office for each fiscal year since 2015-2016, including the current fiscal year? McPherson then goes on to ask to have the numbers broken down by specific employee, and she also asks about Uber expenses. She's trying to catch all their extra travel expenses. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of McPherson, generally speaking. She was an absolutely over-the-top NDP activist here provincially before she barely took the most NDP riding in the most NDP city in the entire province of Alberta back in 2019. And I'm pretty sure she probably feels the same way about me. But you know what? Credit where it's due. I'll be far more fair to McPherson than she would ever be to a conservative. This question of hers reveals even more hypocrisy from my main political and comedic muse, Catherine McKenna, the former environment minister, now infrastructure minister, and of course, perennial political train wreck. During her entertaining, however, highly destructive time at environment and climate change, Minister McKenna spearheaded the carbon tax and the new gendered lens for pipeline approvals, and she is the liberal Einstein who excused arsonists in BC to then blame climate change for their forest fires a few years ago. She mistook a puffin for a penguin. She congratulated Syria for signing onto the Paris Agreement on climate change. And she wants us to believe she snowshoes to work in a skiff of snow and rides her bike in high heels in the summer, all to save on the greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, McKenna likes to save on greenhouse gas emissions, except when she's heading the ministry with the most amount of tax dollars spent on taxis and Ubers. Let me show you. Take a look at this on page 36. Environment and climate change spent over $143,000 on taxis. It's mostly under McKenna. New Minister Wilkinson, that's the last part of 2019-2020, is responsible for just a little over $30,000 of that $143,000. Way to fight climate change, you guys. Were all the cabs to carry McKenna's 24-person social media team to follow her around and take pictures of her or something? Did you know that? We broke that story a few years ago. McKenna regularly has around 24 people involved in vetting her gaffe-prone Twitter account, and still so many gaffes. Why are these people taking taxis and Ubers in the National Capital Region at all? McKenna had the government create an expensive private shuttle bus system for her and her bureaucrats a few years ago. The bus scheme is 2 shuttles operating for 9.5 hours per day on an ongoing basis. 1 van and 1 larger 15-passenger van with the fuel, of course, paid for by environment and climate change. The van runs every 10 minutes between 2 Gatineau addresses. That's every 10 minutes, whether there are people in them or not. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, all day long for 251 days per year. And these taxis and Uber expenses, they're in addition to McKenna's thousands of kilometers in mileage on her ministerial limo that she won't tell us about. Did you know that too? Despite the records absolutely existing for vehicle maintenance and driver man hours purposes, and despite most of the other ministries keeping these records quite diligently and then turning them over to us when we ask for them, McKenna's ministry says her records just don't exist at all. Yeah, right. And Trudeau only did blackface just 3 times. You see, McKenna won't turn those records over to us because they will undoubtedly reveal a scandal like the one we uncovered when we dug into Chrystia Freeland's limo records a few months back. We discovered Freeland, another one who wants us to believe she just bikes back and forth to work. Well, she sends her limo ahead of her plane completely empty to meet her at the airport when she flies from Ottawa to Montreal. And you know what else? The secrecy, well, it's continuing for McKenna at her new ministry in infrastructure. Look at this. Still on the question of taxi and Uber expenses, but at the new Ministry of Infrastructure. Page 73, infrastructure claims not to be able to track the spending at all, just like her mileage in her ministerial limo. Look at this. It is not possible to extract the amount pertaining to the minister's office. And these people expect us to believe that's a reasonable excuse, even though other ministries turned this data over quite easily in this same order paper question. It's basic accounting. Tell us how much you spent on these things. McKenna may keep trying to hide her hypocrisy, but I'll keep digging. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunreid. Our competitors in the mainstream media have used the coronavirus to further completely abdicate their responsibility to hold the government to account on behalf of the people. They're allowed, unlike us, to go to the Rideau Cottage press conferences, but they're asking tough questions like, how you holding up there, Justin Trudeau? That's why we aren't allowed in. To support our legal battle to get into those Rideau Cottage press conferences, please go to letusreport.ca.